Is this the beginning of World War III? That was the question millions of Europeans woke up to on the morning of September 10th, 2025. Because during the night, Poland, a NATO country, came under direct attack. Sirens howled across the skies of Lublin and Podlasie as swarms of Russian Shahed drones crossed into Polish airspace. Anti-aircraft guns thundered, F-16s scrambled, and explosions lit the countryside as Poland's defenses fought to protect its people. For the first time since the Cold War, Alliance territory was not just threatened, it was violated. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk did not mince words. Polish airspace was violated by a huge number of Russian drones. Those drones that posed a direct threat were shot down. The admission was staggering. For months, NATO leaders warned of this exact scenario, a strike spilling over the Ukrainian border and landing on Alliance soil. And now, the nightmare was real. Wreckage with Russian markings smoldered in Polish fields. Farmers photographed twisted metal in their crops, the remains of drones meant to kill. Local media carried footage of fiery trails in the night sky as missiles intercepted targets above villages. In Warsaw, lawmakers convened an emergency session. Across Europe, headlines screamed of escalation. And in Washington, the White House went into crisis mode. Ukraine endured its own nightmare that night. More than 400 drones and 40 missiles unleashed across 15 regions. But for the rest of the world, the story was clear. This wasn't just Ukraine's war anymore. It was Poland under attack, NATO under fire, the red line crossed. And so the question hangs heavy in the air. Is this how the next world war begins? It began shortly after midnight. Ukrainian radar screens were already glowing with hundreds of inbound tracks. A massive Russian assault targeting Kyiv, Lviv, Vinnytsia, and beyond. But as the waves of drones crossed Ukraine, some continued further west. Their course was unmistakable. They were headed for Poland. At 12:47 a.m., Polish air defense near Lublin confirmed the first breach. Low-flying drones, buzzing like giant insects, slipped across the border. Within minutes, air raid sirens screamed through the region. Families jolted awake, rushing to basements. Children cried as the sound of engines and explosions echoed overhead. In Chelm, residents filmed eerie red dots gliding across the sky, followed by streaks of interceptors. In Biała Podlaska, debris from a destroyed drone fell into a schoolyard, smashing windows. Thankfully, no one was inside. The Polish military reacted with precision. Patriot missile batteries locked on, blasting targets into fireballs that illuminated the countryside. Fighter jets scrambled from bases at Poznan and Krzyżany, racing east to chase down intruders. Territorial defense units were activated, setting up checkpoints and preparing for the possibility of more attacks. By dawn, at least several drones had been confirmed destroyed within Polish territory. Their wreckage told the story, Cyrillic lettering on broken fuselages, components traced back to Iran, and navigation systems clearly programmed for deep strikes. These were not stray machines blown off course. They were weapons deliberately launched that crossed into NATO skies. The symbolism hit harder than the shrapnel. Poland had spent decades building itself into a modern European democracy, protected under the shield of NATO. For years, Article 5 was seen as a distant promise, a clause buried in treaties. On this night, it suddenly felt alive and terrifying. In Warsaw, commentators drew immediate parallels with history. In September 1939, Poland was the first victim of a wider war that engulfed the world. In September 2025, could it happen again? The night Poland's skies were breached was not just another escalation. It was the moment a border between war and peace was erased. And once erased, it cannot easily be redrawn. By sunrise, Poland was already moving at wartime speed. The government's response to the drone incursions was swift, calculated, and unmistakably serious. At 6 a.m., the Ministry of Defense released emergency orders. Territorial defense reservists across 4 eastern voivodeships, Lublin, Podlasie, Podkarpacie, and Świętokrzyski, were required to report within 6 hours. 6 more voivodeships were given 12. Maps lit up on Polish television, with red zones demanding immediate mobilization and yellow zones following closely behind. Images of men and women arriving at military posts flooded social media. Some wore camouflage, others came in jeans and jackets, carrying backpacks hastily stuffed with essentials. Veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan stood alongside students, factory workers, and teachers. "It feels different this time," one reservist told reporters outside a Lublin base. "Before, it was always training. Now it's real." The civilian population braced itself. In towns near the border, supermarkets were stripped of bottled water, canned food, and batteries. Gas stations reported long lines as residents filled tanks, just in case. Parents debated whether to send their children to school, while universities in Warsaw announced online classes until further notice. Yet fear was matched by defiance. Flags appeared on balconies, church bells rang in solidarity, and crowds gathered in city squares chanting, "Polska nigdy się nie podda," Poland will never surrender. In Warsaw, the Sejm, Parliament, held an extraordinary session. Normally divided by bitter politics, lawmakers stood together in rare unity. Prime Minister Tusk declared, "We are under attack. Not only Ukraine suffers now, Poland suffers too. But let there be no mistake, Poland is NATO, and NATO will not fall." The chamber erupted in applause. Even opposition leaders echoed the sentiment, pledging unconditional support for national defense. The alliance wasted no time. Within hours, convoys of American and German vehicles were spotted rolling east on Polish highways. Patriot systems from Germany and the Netherlands joined Polish batteries. British reconnaissance drones launched from bases near Krakow. French Mirage jets flew into forward positions. The sight of multinational forces moving through Polish towns reassured some, but unsettled others. "It feels like we're on the edge of something bigger," a shopkeeper in Lublin told local TV. "Like history is repeating itself." That sense of history weighed heavily. For many Poles, memories of September 1939 are ingrained in family stories and national identity. Commentators wasted no time drawing parallels. Then, Poland was attacked and abandoned. Now, Poland was attacked, but backed by the world's most powerful alliance. Still, the symbolism was chilling. Once again, Poland was the place where lines of peace and war collided. Once again, its skies carried the sound of foreign weapons. By evening, Poland's eastern regions looked transformed. Checkpoints dotted highways. Anti-aircraft batteries glimmered on the horizon. Fighter jets roared overhead on constant patrol. The once quiet fields of Lublin now bristled with steel, missiles, and soldiers. But it wasn't just military hardware that defined the moment. It was the mindset. Ordinary citizens accepted that Poland was now the shield of Europe, and that meant sacrifice, vigilance, and resolve. Poland was no longer a safe rear area of NATO. It was the front line. And the world was watching closely, asking, if drones could cross Polish skies tonight, what might come tomorrow? Missiles, bombers, or something far worse? As dawn spread across Europe, NATO headquarters in Brussels became the epicenter of a storm. The news was no longer deniable. Russian drones had crossed into Polish airspace. The alliance's worst-case scenario had arrived. Poland wasted no time. Warsaw formally invoked Article 4 of the NATO Treaty, calling for immediate consultations. By mid-morning, representatives of all 32 member states were on emergency calls. Screens lit up in Brussels, with the faces of presidents, prime ministers, and defense ministers, each demanding clarity. What exactly had happened? How serious was the violation? Polish officials presented radar tracks, recovered drone wreckage with Cyrillic markings, and eyewitness footage. There was no doubt. This was Russian. The only question was what to do next. In corridors and private calls, another, far more dangerous clause was whispered. Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. But invoking it could mean war, not just for Poland, but for Germany, France, Britain, America, and every NATO country. Was a swarm of drones enough to justify it? Or would restraint show weakness? The room buzzed with fear and anger. If we do nothing, one diplomat warned, we invite more. Next time it will not be drones. It will be missiles. But if we strike back, another countered, we may open the gates to global war. In Washington, President Biden assured Poland of America's commitment, but behind closed doors, Pentagon planners debated options. Reinforce Poland's defenses with more troops and Patriots. Launch cyber operations against Russian command systems. Strike launch sites inside Russia. Each option carried risk. Reinforcements would reassure, but not deter. Cyber strikes could escalate quietly. A direct attack on Russian soil? That risked uncontrolled escalation. Still, US senators thundered on television. Russia has attacked NATO. There must be consequences. In Berlin, Chancellor Olaf Scholz faced mounting pressure. Germany had long walked a cautious line, but with Polish skies violated, the calls for firmness grew louder. France's President Emmanuel Macron urged strategic calm, but dispatched Mirage jets to Eastern Europe. Britain's Prime Minister declared the UK would stand with Poland without hesitation, mobilizing more Typhoon fighters. The alliance was united in principle, but divided in strategy. Everyone agreed the line had been crossed. No one agreed how far to push back. Meanwhile, Moscow played its familiar game of denial and defiance. Russian state TV called the drones navigation errors. Kremlin spokesman accused Poland of staging the incident. Yet propaganda channels boasted, NATO fears us. They will not act. For NATO leaders, the mixed signals only deepened the dilemma. Was Russia probing their... Around the table in Brussels, history weighed heavily. The Cuban Missile Crisis, the Balkan Wars, the endless debates over red lines in Syria. But this was different. This was NATO's own territory. The Secretary General closed the session with words meant to reassure, but that only underscored the danger. We will defend every inch of NATO territory. Poland is not alone. The pledge echoed around the world. But in Warsaw, in Lublin, in every Polish town where families huddled through the night, one question lingered. Would NATO defend by deterrence or by war? The moment Polish airspace was violated, the story stopped being local. It wasn't just about Lublin, Chelm, or the drone wreckage scattered in cornfields. It became a global story, a shockwave racing across continents. In Washington, the White House lit up with urgency. The president faced the cameras with a grave expression. Let me be clear, the United States stands with Poland. NATO stands united. We will defend every inch of our alliance. Markets trembled as he spoke. Oil prices jumped overnight. Investors fearing war in Europe could spiral into a worldwide economic collapse. The Pentagon quietly raised its alert status, moving carrier groups in the Atlantic closer to Europe and reinforcing bases in Germany. In Berlin and Paris, leaders balanced reassurance with fear. Germany pledged more troops to NATO's eastern flank, even as citizens filled the streets with protests demanding restraint. France warned of unprecedented danger, but stopped short of calling for military retaliation. In London, Parliament erupted with fiery speeches, MPs demanding Britain stand shoulder to shoulder with Poland. Europe felt the old ghost stirring. The continent once again the center of a conflict that could decide the fate of the world. Moscow doubles down. Moscow's response was defiance mixed with denial. State TV claimed Poland had faked the evidence. Kremlin spokesman shrugged off accusations, insisting the drones were malfunctioning Ukrainian weapons. Yet, on other channels, propagandists smirked. NATO is weak. They tremble before us. We will push further. It was the classic Russian tactic: deny with one hand, threaten with the other. And for NATO, that made the stakes even higher. In Beijing, China's foreign ministry called for restraint on all sides, but analysts noted a quiet satisfaction. The crisis tied down America and Europe, giving China more room to maneuver in Asia. In Tehran, hardliners cheered. For years, Iran supplied Russia with drones. Now, those same drones had struck NATO skies. To them, it was proof their partnership with Moscow mattered, and that the West could be bloodied. In Africa, Latin America, and Asia, reactions were split. Some nations condemned Russia outright, warning of a slide into global chaos. Others accused NATO of provoking the confrontation. The divide showed how fragile the world order had become, and how quickly it could fracture if war expanded. On social media, hashtags trended worldwide. WWW3, just Poland attack, NATO, just Russia. Clips of drones buzzing over Polish skies spread like wildfire. Grainy footage of explosions above Lublin racked up millions of views. TikTok users posted memes comparing the moment to the start of World War II. For ordinary people, the line between analysis and fear blurred. Stock up food, some posts warned. This is it. Others prayed, others mocked, but everyone felt the same unease, that history was tipping towards something catastrophic. The question that lingers. Global markets shook, governments convened emergency sessions, and armies shifted east. Yet the core question remained unanswered. What comes next? Would NATO reinforce, but stop short of war? Would Russia push further, daring the alliance to act? Or would one miscalculation, one missile, one misread radar, ignite a chain reaction no one could control? The world was holding its breath. The night drones crossed into Poland. The war in Ukraine became a European war, and maybe the opening chapter of something far bigger. On the night of September 9th to 10th, 2025, the war in Ukraine crossed a line. What had once been described as a regional conflict spilled into NATO airspace. Russian drones, the same that terrorized Ukrainian cities for months, violated Polish skies. Sirens howled in Lublin, debris fell in Podlasie, and families huddled in shelters, not in Kyiv, but in Poland. This was not just another escalation. It was the first direct strike against NATO territory. Poland responded with discipline, mobilizing thousands of reservists, activating defenses, and standing shoulder to shoulder with its allies. NATO convoys thundered eastward, fighter jets filled the skies, and emergency meetings in Brussels and Washington stretched into the dawn. The alliance had promised for decades to defend every inch of its soil. Now, that promise faced its first real test in generations. Moscow denied responsibility, as it always does, but its denials rang hollow. The Wreckage told the truth, and propaganda voices inside Russia gloated that NATO was too cautious to respond. The Kremlin was playing with fire, testing the West's resolve, daring it to move. Meanwhile, the world reacted with fear. Markets plunged, hashtags like WWW3 trended globally, and commentators compared the night to September 1939 and the Cuban Missile Crisis. Allies in Europe tightened their defenses. Rivals in Beijing and Tehran watched with quiet satisfaction. Ordinary people everywhere asked themselves the same terrifying question: is this how the next world war begins? Because history teaches us a brutal lesson. Great wars rarely start with a single dramatic strike. They begin with small violations, border clashes, incidents that escalate because no one is willing to back down. A drone today, a missile tomorrow, a chain reaction that could engulf nations. September 10th may be remembered not as just another night of air raids, but as the spark that lit the fuse. So now the question is not for NATO generals or politicians in Brussels. It is for you, the viewer. Do you think this is the beginning of World War III? Tell us in the comments, share your thoughts, and stay with us. Because the story of Poland's night under attack is not the end. It may only be the beginning.